Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Marissa, an attorney with Legal Aid of North Carolina's Helpline. Today, we have Juliana presenting for us. If you are unfamiliar with the format of this event, first, Juliana is going to review a PowerPoint presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comments section on Facebook. We'll review all questions put in the chat boxes during the Q&A session at the end. Please remember that this is a public forum and Legal Aid is not representing you at this time. Juliana will go over this in more detail, but please remember to keep your questions as general as possible, as we cannot provide any legal advice specific to your individual situation. The session will end when there are no more questions, and regardless of where we are, we will have a hard stop at 4:30 p.m. With all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Juliana to get us started.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you everyone for joining us today for the SNAP 101 Listen and Learn presentation. Two quick disclaimers, as Marissa had mentioned. While I'm an attorney, I am not your attorney and I cannot give you specific advice, but I'm happy to answer general questions at the end. Second, this presentation is present as of today. Policy changes are possible and expected, but the presentation will be updated in the future to reflect those changes as they go into effect. So today's presentation will cover four main topics: how to apply for SNAP benefits, how to maximize your SNAP benefits, how the recertification program goes, and how the rights that you should know, especially during appeals and hearings. So first, what is SNAP? SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. In North Carolina, it's known as the Food and Nutrition Services, or food stamps for short. The purpose of this program is to provide low-income households with money each month to help them purchase food. The money is placed on a reusable EBT card, and it can only be used to purchase eligible foods. How you can apply for SNAP benefits. There are four ways to apply for SNAP benefits. First, in person, by fax, by mail, or by ePass, which is the online platform. Every applicant has a right to file an application on the same day they visit DSS during office hours if you choose to apply in person. If you apply in person, you can also be interviewed by that caseworker on the same day. But regardless of how you apply, every applicant will be interviewed by a caseworker. And for more information on the application process, you can visit this link on the Department of Human Health and Services website. The basic eligibility requirements are three. The first is to have an eligible immigration status. Second, you must be a North Carolina resident. And third, you must meet the income rules. But as an exception, some people also have work requirements. These work requirements were waived during the public health emergency, but they have now started again and are expected to change in the future. So if you are an immigrant and seeking to get SNAP eligibility, there are particular statuses that can get SNAP benefits. Some of the eligible statuses are U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents with a 5-year bar after they lawfully enter the United States, refugees, asylees, and Afghan special immigrants and parolees. The refugees, asylees, and Afghan special immigrants and parolees, they do not have the 5-year bar. It's important to note, too, that not everyone in your household has to have an eligible immigration status. You can apply for the members of your household who have the eligible immigration status and not for the ones who are ineligible. Secondarily, DSS cannot require you to provide a social security number for household members who are not applying for SNAP benefits. Regarding SNAP income rules, many households are categorically eligible. That essentially means that they have an income of below 200% of the federal poverty line with no disqualified household members. As you can see on this chart, the maximum income limit goes up as the household size does. And it's also important to note that to be categorically eligible, there are no asset limits. So if you meet that 200% of the federal poverty line, DSS will not ask about your assets. Also, for eligibility, there is a felony controlled substance ban, meaning individuals who have committed and were convicted under federal or state law on or after August 23rd of 1996 of any offense classified as a felony by the law of the jurisdiction involved with the element of possession, use, or distribution of a controlled substance are permanently disqualified from SNAP. There is one exception to that permanent disqualification for people convicted of classes H or I felonies. In North Carolina, they may reestablish their eligibility for SNAP if they meet a minimum disqualification period after release of custody, which is 6 months, and then are referred to an area mental health authority for assessment. Jumping into the work requirements, to continue receiving SNAP, an able-bodied adult without dependents, meaning you're over the age of 18 and don't have children or other dependents relying upon you, have to work 80 hours a month, which averages out to about 20 hours a week, or participate in another work program for also 20 hours a week, totaling 80 hours a month. This work can be employment, self-employment, volunteer, or work in exchange for goods and services, or a combination of any of those. So, for example, someone could babysit and have irregular hours, which would still satisfy the requirements of self-employment, so long as they work 80 hours a month. If they were short, they could then use other volunteer work or other sorts of work to meet that 80-hour requirement. There is also a good cause exception. If you intended to or would have worked those 80 hours a month, but missed some work for a good cause, you may still be considered to have met the work requirement in the absence of that work, so long as it was temporary and you retain your job. So some examples of that could be an illness or household emergency or temporary unavailability of transportation. And finally, if you don't meet these work requirements or any of the exceptions, you're only entitled to receive SNAP for 3 months in a 36-month period. Some exemptions to get around those work requirements would be being under 18 years old or at least 55 years old within a SNAP household that contains a member under the age of 18, meaning as long as you have one child in the house under age 18. A pregnant person, homelessness, veteran status, regardless of the conditions of your discharge. If you're between the ages of 18 and 24 and you were in the foster care system when you turned 18, or if you're found unfit for employment. The finding to support unfit for employment could come from workers' compensation, disability benefits from Social Security, or Medicaid based on disability. And those have to be medically certified as unfit for employment. You may also be unfit if you're unable to work due to alcohol or drug addiction, at least a half-time student, or obviously unfit for work based on the worker's observation or judgment, meaning the DSS employee would make that determination. Some of the important things to keep in mind with work activity is to ensure that you're reporting. So if you're an able-bodied adult without dependents, it's very important that you report your work activity to DSS. You should also report to DSS if you believe you meet an exemption. Um, Notably, don't assume that DSS has the correct and updated information in your file. If you've moved any of your contact information or other eligibility requirements, such as work, minor children, any changes that may affect your eligibility, it's very important that you report that to DSS, even if it's before a recertification program or recertification period to ensure that they have your correct information. Now moving on to the second topic, how to maximize your SNAP benefits. So your County Department of Social Services, DSS, determines your household monthly SNAP benefit based on your income, household size, and expenses. Your household is all of the people who live together and buy or cook the food together. So again, you can see on this chart that the maximum benefit amount goes up as your household size does as well. Generally, a higher monthly income means that your household will receive less SNAP benefits, but you can balance that out with higher monthly expenses, which would mean you receive more SNAP benefits. Um, DSS requires verifications to determine your eligibility. While recommended verifications are optional and used to determine benefit levels. It's in your best interest to provide the recommended verifications. Providing recommended verifications ensures that you'll get all the SNAP benefits that you're possibly entitled to. So again, to distinguish the requirements versus recommended verifications, requirements would be items included in your eligibility, such as your identity, citizenship or immigration status, your household size and composition, and social security numbers for those who are applying, and income. Recommended verifications would support things like your expenses, so utility expenses, your mortgage or rental expenses, property taxes and insurance, medical expenses for specified persons, legally obligated child support payments, and child care expenses. Child care expenses do have to be expenses related to your work, so it would be things like daycare or babysitting. Now moving on to recertification for SNAP. How you can recertify. SNAP households must recertify for SNAP benefits every 6 months. DSS will mail that household a form that must be returned to DSS by the 15th day of the last month of their recertification period in order to avoid any potential lapses in benefits or missed benefits. It's best practice to submit all required and recommended verifications at that time too. So, for example, using this calendar, Julie's household is certified for SNAP benefits from January 1st to June 30th, her initial 6 month period. In early June, Julie will receive the recertification form from DSS. To be timely, DSS must receive that form completed with any of the required verifications by June 15th. It's not sufficient for you to mail those forms and verifications by the 15th, but rather DSS has to receive them and have them in hand by that date. Going back to reporting changes during the certification period. During the certification period, there are a few required reporting and others that are recommended again. So you must report if the able-bodied adult without dependents stops working the average of 80 hours a month, as I previously described. If anyone in the household receives lottery or gambling winnings of $4,250 or more, or the household income goes above 130% of the federal poverty line. While you're in your certification period, the 6 months that you get benefits for, the household is not required to report any increases in expenses or decreases in income. However, reporting those changes, even though they're recommended and not required, may help to increase your SNAP benefits. Moving on to the final key category, SNAP appeals and knowing your rights. It's important to know you have rights. If you disagree with any action taken by DSS that could impact your SNAP benefits, you likely have appeal rights. It's very important that you read any notices from DSS carefully, as those will always explain your appeal rights and any deadlines that you must meet to seek that appeal. In this case, an appeal means requesting a hearing. And there are two main types of SNAP hearings. The first is state fair hearings, which handles eligibility, benefits amounts, and overpayments. The second type is administrative disqualification hearings, which is an intentional program violation, essentially fraud, and I'll dive deeper into that in a moment. So at a state fair hearing, you have an opportunity for a fair hearing must be provided to any household who is negatively impacted by DSS actions that would affect your SNAP household's participation. To appeal, you have to make a clear statement that can be oral or written to DSS that you want to present your case to a higher authority. A good rule of thumb is to get your request for a hearing in writing, just so that way it's not lost and you can ensure that the process moves along in a timely fashion. But you can do that request orally by phone or in office as well. Next, generally, a request for a state fair hearing notice must be made within 90 calendar days of the date on the DSS notice. Although in many cases, DSS must continue SNAP benefits at the prior level if the hearing request is made within 10 days. So again, that reiterates the importance of reading your notices carefully to see what your deadlines are and if by appealing before the end of that deadline could preserve your rights to benefits in the meantime. And finally, a state fair hearing is conducted by a state hearing officer within the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Moving on to administrative disqualification hearings. These are used only when DSS believes it has clear and convincing evidence that an individual has committed one or more acts of intentional program violations, which is IPV for short. An IPV occurs when a SNAP household member knowingly, willfully, and with deceitful intent commits a fraudulent act, such as making a false statement or hiding information to get benefits that you know you're not eligible for, misusing an EBT card, including selling or trading your benefits, or using SNAP benefits to buy food for or share food with someone who is not in your SNAP household. Your house will receive notice that you're being accused of an IPV. The notice will include the date and for the local disqualification hearing. DSS usually includes a waiver form with this notice that says you can agree to waive the disqualification hearing and accept the consequences. However, it's important to know you do not have to sign this waiver. You should be well informed of what rights you would be waiving before you would sign that form. And at the local disqualification hearing, a hearing officer would be someone from DSS who has not previously been involved in your case. The hearing officer must provide the SNAP household with a copy of the decision, which often comes by certified mail. After a decision is made, the SNAP household has 15 days from the date of the decision to appeal it if they disagree with the decision. After an appeal, the household will have a state disqualification hearing with a hearing officer from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And so, what are the consequences of getting the IPV, especially relating to the waiver? Your first IPV, this person will be disqualified from SNAP for 12 months. On your second IPV, you're disqualified for 24 months. And on your third IPV, you're disqualified permanently from benefits. So that's why it's very important to not waive unless you are absolutely certain, because this has some pretty high consequences. Misrepresenting residence or identity to receive multiple benefits can also result in a 10-year SNAP disqualification. It's also important to know, related to IPVs, that all members of the SNAP household may be jointly responsible for paying back the SNAP benefits that the household should not have received. However, the person who is found guilty of the IPV is the person disqualified. So, the rights of the SNAP household during the hearing process. Before a hearing, the household or its representative may review the case file and records that DSS plans to use at the hearing. A household may represent themselves, retain legal counsel, or have another spokesperson represent them. The household may also bring their own witnesses and submit evidence, such as records, receipts, other statements, that the household believes will help explain their case. The household may also question or challenge any testimony or evidence presented by DSS. And finally, the household may also request a postponement of up to 30 days if they need more time to prepare or to seek legal counsel. And here is legal aid's contact information. If you are over 60, you can use the senior legal helpline, or you can use our toll-free legal aid helpline number. And the hours that they take calls are listed there. I'll also open the floor for questions now. But again, it's important to note, while I'm an attorney, I am not your attorney and cannot answer specific legal questions.
All right. I am not seeing any questions at the moment, but just gonna leave just a few moments here to see if any come in. If you do have a question, you cannot unmute in this forum. So if you have a question, you either need to put it in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comments section on Facebook. So we'll give just a few minutes here to see if any questions do come in. All right. As I am not seeing any questions, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all of you for joining us, with a special thank you to Julian. Oh, wait, spoke too soon. Can you just go through some of the items that might not be required for, I'm assuming this is a request for reconsideration hearing that might not be required but may be helpful to someone presenting their case.
Absolutely. So generally those would be things to support your expenses. So again, it would be like utilities, mortgage, things that you regularly see as an expense. They do have to fall into particular categories. So it would have to be something related to like your work expenses, living expenses, or medical expenses. Um, and then the proof would just be that bill, for example, or if you have multiples of that bill to show it's reoccurring in nature, that could also be useful.
Perfect. Okay. And so now I will say thank you to all of you for joining us with a thank you. Special thank you to Juliana for presenting and for answering the question. If you would like to review anything that was discussed today, we have posted a recording of today's event to our Facebook page. It will be immediately available on Facebook for about a week, and then after that, it will be available on Legal Aid of North Carolina's YouTube page to access at any time. You do not need a YouTube account or a Facebook account to access the recordings. If you would like to register for one of our other Listen and Learn programs, such as Medicaid Rights, which is tomorrow, or child custody, something about fair housing, tenant rights, you can do so on our website at www.legalaidnc.org/clinics. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their afternoon.